So we're heading towards a critical moment, a very important moment when it comes to Supreme Court review of gun rights issues. Two major cases challenging rifle bans and magazine bans, which are the Vermontes and Duncan case, are now likely heading to the same Supreme Court conference on February 20th. And now they won't actually be alone. Multiple other rifle and magazine ban challenges are lining up for that same exact conference. And what this means is we could be looking at a perfect storm of Second Amendment cases all landing at the Supreme Court's desk at the very same time. This is exactly the scenario that many justices have been maybe waiting for or hinting at, and that they've been looking for a long time. So let's break down what is happening and why this could finally force the Supreme Court to answer a very simple question. Are AR-15s and magazines protected by the Second Amendment? Now, before we jump into this video, if you guys want to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to subscribe. You can also turn on all notifications because that helps to ensure that YouTube will send you these videos once I release them. I also want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is Attorneys on Retainer. When it comes to self-defense protection, in my opinion, AOR is in a league of their own. They're backed by an actual law firm, the Attorneys for Freedom, and they're always expanding upon their benefits to try to give you the best coverage that you can get as a member. And also this month in February, they have a conference coming up. I will be there along with a bunch of other creators and a lot of other speakers. So if you're interested, you can get, tickets for that event. That's going to be in Arizona. Check that out. I will link that down below if you want to attend. But again, thank you so much to AOR for sponsoring and supporting this channel. So if you've been following the channel for a while, you know that the Supreme Court has been avoiding rifle and magazine ban cases for years. And really the core question that they need to address is very simple. Does the Second Amendment protect common semi-automatic rifles like AR-15s and then also standard capacity magazines? Now on this topic, lower courts are deeply divided. Some courts say that they are in fact protected arms. Others say that they are too militaristic and they're too useful for military service, and some say that they can still be banned even if they are protected arms. And that confusion is exactly what these cases are asking for the Supreme Court to finally address and fix. Now, the two main cases that we need to focus on are now heading to Supreme Court conference. They've been relisted multiple times, and now they are kind of going to sync up with a bunch of other rifle and magazine ban cases at the same conference. Now, the first case is called Vermontes versus Cook County. That case challenges Cook County's ban on so-called assault weapons, which includes AR-15s and dozens of other commonly owned rifles. The plaintiffs argued in this case that these rifles are in common use and therefore they are protected under Heller and Bruin. They are asking for the Supreme Court to finally say once and for all that states cannot ban an entire class of commonly owned firearms. The second key case that we're going to be talking about is Duncan versus Bonta, and that deals with California's magazine ban. This is the case that was previously granted, vacated, and remanded after the Supreme Court issued their Bruin ruling. It's now back in front of the Supreme Court once again because lower courts continue to uphold magazine bans despite what Bruin said in that analysis. Now, there have been some important developments in both of these cases with their relists. So both of the Vermontes case and the Duncan case have been relisted once again instead of just being outright denied. So in some ways, that is a good sign. That means that the justices are actively discussing both of these cases behind closed doors. And based on the court's calendar, these cases are now likely heading to the February 20th conference, and they will sync up with multiple other rifle and magazine ban cases. Other rifle and magazine ban challenges from different states are also expected to be considered at that very same time. That creates something that we have not seen yet. Really, you're going to have multiple cases on the same constitutional question landing together in front of the Supreme Court on the same date. Now, here's why this is a big deal. This is exactly what many justices have been suggesting they have been waiting for. Instead of taking maybe one isolated case from one specific state, the court can look at multiple bans, multiple circuits, multiple conflicting rulings all at once and really address that issue nationwide. Instead of doing it piecemeal, they can look at a whole host of cases that came out of different circuit courts dealing with the same issue. That would also potentially avoid, the whole question that's been raised about some of these cases being the wrong vehicle, where if you have multiple cases dealing with the same issue, you kind of resolve maybe that question about a specific case being the wrong vehicle or not having the right procedural posture or not addressing the correct issue. This is now shaping up as a coordinated moment where the court can finally answer, are AR-15s protected arms? Are magazine bans constitutional? And can states ban common firearms in magazines? But like I mentioned, with both of these cases, they have been relisted multiple times. Now, relists are essentially not random at all. Historically, cases that are relisted at least once have a much better, and higher chance really of being granted review by the Supreme Court. But cases that are relisted many times can go either way. Now, that's not to say that a Second Amendment case relisted, 10, 11, 12, 14 times maybe, aren't going to be granted review. That is not the case. We've seen a lot of high profile two-way cases like the Cargill bump stock case and even the Bruin case get relisted, a ton of times and still be granted review by the Supreme Court. However, it's also important to note that sometimes multiple relist does mean that there is going to be a denial, maybe with something like a dissent. But sometimes it also means that the court is lining cases up together for a coordinated grant, and they're going to look at multiple cases all at once. That makes this moment so critical and very important. It may not be that just the Vermontes and Duncan cases are, in high importance. Maybe the Supreme Court is trying to line up multiple cases, grant review to all of them at once, look at multiple circuit courts, look at multiple state bans, look at multiple issues, and then address those all together. So really, where does this leave us? We now have the Vermontes case likely heading to the February 20th conference. Duncan is also likely going to go to that same conference because they've kind of trailed one another. They've gone to the same conferences. They've survived the same conferences, even when other two-way cases were denied. And multiple other rifle and magazine ban cases and challenges are already set for that same conference date on February 20th. This kind of creates the perfect storm of cases all focused on the same constitutional question, and they're all going to be in front of the Supreme Court. And if the court grants even one of them, or maybe several of these cases together, we may finally get a definitive ruling by the Supreme Court on rifle bans and magazine bans, and that would address this issue nationwide. So after years of delay, this could be the moment that the court essentially can no longer avoid this issue and potentially fulfill that promise that they're going to address this issue in a term or two. So you may be asking what comes next. Well, the next Supreme Court conference right now that's scheduled on their calendar is February 20th. And like I mentioned, there are other rifle and magazine ban cases that are already scheduled for that Supreme Court conference. That is the key date to watch for to see if the Vermontes and Duncan cases are set also for that conference. And I suspect that they will, and they will likely be lumped in with those other cases that are going to be considered. If these cases are granted, we could see briefing begin, maybe in the spring, and a major Second Amendment decision by the end of this term, or essentially by, at the very latest, late June. However, on the flip side, if these cases are denied, it would once again signal that the court is still unwilling to step in despite the statements from the court saying that they would address this issue in a term or two. So as of right now, the Supreme Court has avoided rifle bans and magazine bans like the plague. They have not taken up one of these cases. They're going to have multiple in front of them at the same conference. And so we're going to get an answer from the Supreme Court, and they really have a critical decision in front of them. Are they finally going to address this rifle ban and magazine ban issue, or are they going to punt once again? So that's what's happening right now in the critical rifle and magazine ban cases. As we get an answer from the Supreme Court, as we get their decision, I will let you guys know. If you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you hit the like button. All of that tells the algorithm that you appreciate this type of two-way content and it should share it to more people. But as always, thank you so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.